In 2024, I feel like I learned a lot about my photography. And so my goal of this video is to talk through some of those learnings, whether they came from like mistakes or things that I tried and they worked out well. Yeah, I want to share the good, the bad, and the ugly in hopes that it's helpful for somebody else, but also as a moment to reflect and to grow off of 2024 and hopefully continue to enjoy photography in 2025 and beyond. So the first thing that I want to talk about is if I could talk to myself 10 years ago, I'm not sure if you can hear the cat, but he's being very vocal today. If I could talk to myself 10 years ago, the first thing that I would say is if you exchange photos for money, you are a professional photographer. And there are for sure levels to it. Like you can be bad, you can be good, you can be somewhere in between. But I think I missed out on a lot of opportunities and I slowed my growth down quite considerably by being too hesitant and by being afraid to put that label as a professional on my photography, on my work. So I would definitely encourage other people to lean into that and to be ready to grow faster and do more if that's something that you are interested in. Um, the second thing that I want to talk about is that doing photography professionally definitely diminishes the enjoyment for me as a hobby. And that's something that I was also a little bit worried about whenever I was thinking about trying to do photography as a business. Um, and yeah, I can confirm that it does definitely make it more difficult for me to enjoy picking up a camera outside of professional settings, which is definitely not where I want to be. But that's okay because I don't want photography to be a 9 to 5 for me. I don't want it to be a main source of income. And I think as long as I'm able to stick to that kind of boundary, I'll continue to be very happy with photography moving forward. Um, One thing though that I do feel like I was able to nail down in 2024 was a bit of like an editing style or editing workflow. And I think film is the reason I was able to kind of finally land on something that feels right. I shot more film in 2024 than I had previously, and because of that, I was able to try out some different film stocks and kind of see like their tendencies, like what colors they saturate or whether or not there's, any sort of green tint in the shadows or anything like that. And with all of those characteristics, I was able to really figure out like, oh, I love that. I like how it looks. I think it performs well in these specific situations. And because of that, I was able to find photographers who also lean towards, specific characteristics to edit their photos. And so I've been using a lot of Dylan Spitz presets, which I'll link down below, but there are other creators too, other photographers who have enjoyed their presets. So I'll try to put a little bit of a list in the description. So if you're interested, you can look at some of those. And I also think it's helpful to see presets because they can help you kind of build your own. You can see where people started from and get an idea of what feels right for you. So definitely grateful to film for helping me figure out a little bit of the characteristics that I like in specific photos. The next thing that I want to talk about is gear does matter for me, but probably not in the way that you think. Of course, I'm tempted to buy, the most expensive cameras with the highest specs and all these things, but not that much, honestly. I think because the price tags are so big for some of those products, but also because I don't really see like a specific use case for them right now. And I think that's where I kind of come back to this point that, like, for me, the most exciting thing about gear is picking the right gear for the appropriate situation. So, like, when we went to Japan, I picked the GX85 for all the reasons that I talked about in that video. And because of that, it just felt so right. Whenever I took any photos, there was like an extra layer of satisfaction because I felt like out of all of my options, I chose the one that was best fit for that environment. And so to me, that's how gear matters, is figuring out what's the best camera, what's the best lens, what's the best kit for specific situations. And I'm not going to get it right all the time, but that also kind of makes me like chase the high. So yeah, it's definitely something that's exciting for me and something that I would like to continue to do in 2025 is rotate through my different gear and pick the right one for the right situations. And then speaking of gear, this is like a underrated, overrated section. And so in 2024, I think I learned that Fujifilm is not overrated. I bought this Fujifilm X Pro 3 and I have absolutely loved it. I also bought the Fujifilm X-F10, which I also absolutely adore. And I think that, yeah, for sure, they are more expensive than they probably should be, especially if you're looking at something like the X100 VI or the 5. Um, but the tactility of the cameras, the build of the cameras, the JPEG workflow, all of those are very valuable features for me. The optical hybrid, or the optical, I always say that, the optical digital viewfinder or the hybrid viewfinder in this camera is amazing, especially because I look at screens all day for work. And so, yeah, I think that I've been really happy with my Fuji purchases, and I don't think that they're overrated. But I do think that other brands are starting to catch up. I think, especially if you look at, I think the OM that was released recently has like a JPEG LUT workflow. The Lumix that was, I think the S9 has that like LUT workflow. And so I think other manufacturers are catching up in that. And I think when you look at like the Nikon ZF, you can see some of that tactility, some of that retro. And so, yeah, I think people are starting to recognize that there is value in a lot of these features that maybe don't make the headlines, but are very important for photographers. So, and then speaking of Nikon, my next point is that I think Nikon is underrated. I shot Nikon. That's probably the camera I've shot with the most. That was my first camera that I showed you with the film. And then I think the first DSLR I had was a Nikon D90. That's what I shot with in college and a little bit after college. Then I bought my first full frame camera, which was also a Nikon. And I always enjoyed them. The grips are amazing. The ergonomics are great. The build quality is lovely. But they just felt like a little bit boring to me. And so, especially when I was thinking about getting into video. And so that's why I made the switch to the Sony ecosystem. And after switching back to Nikon, not that like I'm a Nikon only shooter, but I do think that they're underrated. I think they've made a lot of strides in the things that I was particularly looking for. Like they've made huge strides in video because of their acquisition with Red. They have an incredible lineup of mirrorless lenses. Some of them are like small and light and compact, which I think was something I didn't like with their DSLR lenses. And yeah, they just have good cameras. So I've been excited to see Nikon kind of not rebrand, but reapproach how they are doing cameras and lenses and all that with their mirrorless setups. So yeah, big ups to Nikon. And then the last one in the underrated overrated series, I want to talk about the Ricoh GR3 or the 3X. I've never personally owned one, so like take this with a grain of salt, but I would say that they're overrated, but pocket cameras are underrated. And I think the distinction that I want to make here is that like, I don't think you have to pay $1,000 for a pocket camera. I didn't. I bought the Fujifilm X-F10, which is an APS-C camera. It's pocketable and I love it. I think that there are some, like Sony point and shoots or some Canon point and shoots. They don't have as big sensors, I don't think, but yeah, I think pocket cameras are insanely valuable, especially if you live somewhere where it's cold, you have big jacket pockets or something like that. I took the XF10 to New York and it was incredible not to have to worry about like a neck strap. I could just put it in my pocket and yeah, just pull it out whenever I saw a moment that I wanted to capture. Whenever I'm going to like a wedding or a fancy function, I have to wear a suit. I'm always bringing that camera because it fits so nicely in the jacket pocket. And I was able to get some of my favorite photos from some of like the weddings because of that camera, because of that setup. So yeah, pocket camera is definitely underrated. Ricoh potentially overrated, but I just think it's hard to, $1,000 for a camera like that is kind of steep. So yeah, that's underrated, overrated for 2024. Next, I want to talk about printing your work can help you fall in love with your work. And I know that it's become a lot more popular, I think, to print your work. And I don't want to repeat some of the stuff that I've seen and heard. So maybe all that I will say is just printing it is not really at least for me, it's not the whole journey. Printing it and then putting it somewhere where you're going to see it, day in, day out. That really helps me determine what I love or don't love about a particular photo. Just seeing it on a wall, seeing it on a desk, seeing it on a cabinet, refrigerator, whatever. And really just kind of picking apart what's good about this photo or what's not good about this photo. lots of really good learnings from that process, I think. So if you would like to become more familiar with your work and maybe understand what you do and do not like, I think printing photos is a really good way to do it. Okay. Next one is film and JPEGs are important to me. So I printed 60 photos from 2024. I tried to make them my best 60, but you don't really ever know. 60 is such a big number. I tried to do 5 from every month, but it ended up not being that feasible because when I went to Japan and when we went to Japan and when we went to London, there were just so many more photos that I took in those months than other months. But all that to say, more than half of those photos that I printed came from JPEGs or from film. And to me, that's a huge sign that like this camera in particular was a really good purchase for me. I love not having to edit photos. I love being able to get the image right in camera. And I think there's something really satisfying about that. And it also made it so that on those days where maybe I was a little bit drained from professional shooting, I knew that I didn't have to worry about editing, which is honestly the biggest hang up for me whenever I think about personal photography. So yeah, definitely a good workflow for me. Could potentially be a good workflow for you. I'm not sure. This one I'm not going to dive too deep into, but I do want to mention that for me, 2024 helped me realize that YouTube can be a really good outlet for photography. And I think mainly what I want to talk about here is just that like I was so hesitant to try to make videos because I didn't want to learn how to edit. I didn't want to spend a lot of time editing or just like creating these videos where you have to think about kind of like the timelines and the pacing and maybe even get a licensing agent for music and all these other things. So there were a lot of hurdles, but I can honestly say that overcoming all of those hurdles makes it worth it for me. Looking back at some of our travel videos and being able to relive those moments and not have to, I don't know, not have to just guess the context of some of these photos is just really, really worth it for me. It's also really fun to share these photos with like friends and family and also just strangers on the internet. I don't know, it's a very cool outlet for me and for photography. It feels like it gives my photography a place to land in the digital sphere. And then my prints, I think, allow me to put it in the physical sphere. And so, yeah, I feel very satisfied with my photography when it's done. It's not just sitting on a hard drive. It's not just in like a Google photo album or something like that. Like it's living, it's breathing, both physically and digitally. And that's really exciting to me. The next thing is my ideal photography business isn't scalable at this point. I kind of touched on this at the beginning, but I wanted to dive a little bit deeper. So for me, just to give like a lot of context, in 2024, my goal was to make $6,000 from a photography like side business situation. I got pretty close. I think I ended up like 5,600 or 5,700 or something like that. And honestly, the goal wasn't to, make a huge profit or anything like that. It was really just to like fund other photography purchases, whether that's like a camera like this or like a new laptop or something. So I feel like overall it was a success, but I also didn't want it to be something that would be like a full-time job for me, like I mentioned. But it was really interesting to take a step back and be able to see that like because I really value making photography accessible, like I have a lot of friends, family, etc., who maybe photography isn't something that a photographer isn't something they think about hiring unless it's a wedding or unless it's like a huge event. And because of that, they have all these smaller moments that they wish that they had memories from. They wish they had photos from that just weren't from their phones. And so I love being able to be that person. I also really love being able to capture the city that I live in and be able to like share that to the world. Not just through me, but like through the city of Durham and the people that I've worked with there. And so I think I've really been trying to pursue like passion projects with photography. So it was really cool to see that like as a side business, there is some fruitfulness there. But if I wanted to make enough money to like support myself, support my partner, support the things that we want to do and the places we want to see, that isn't realistic. And there isn't a version of what I do now that I could see us making that much money off of it. So yeah, and that's okay with me. I don't want to lose the joy of photography over making some money for it. But I thought that that was something that was nice to kind of realize and kind of put a stamp on, because I think for so long, like I mentioned, I was curious about photography as a job and wanted to see what I could do with it. And I feel like I gave it a pretty good shot and was able to see like the future, like a glimpse into the future. And it's not one that I want to be a part of. I think it would ruin the hobby for me pretty quickly. So, yeah. Oh, and this is something that I think hopefully could be really helpful for some people. In 2024, I learned that you can create your own portfolio without working any professional gigs. And so I did have a portfolio for, like portraits and for like a little bit of wedding stuff and boudoir stuff, but like for like local coverage or like event coverage, I didn't have anything for that, or even like food or restaurant really. And so I wanted to do like a little bit of story time to hopefully give you some context. We moved to Durham in 2021. We lived right downtown. We were able to walk around, go to different restaurants, bars, clubs, etc. And often I would take my camera with me because one, it was just like new places I was excited to go to. But then two, it was still kind of on the tail end of COVID. And so there were a lot of businesses that were struggling. And I thought maybe this would be a way that I could add any sort of value to their situation. So I would take photos, I would post them on Google Maps, and then people would look at them. And so after a while, I was able to get up to like 10 or 12 million views or something like that on Google Maps, which on one hand, it was pretty cool because it was like, hey, this is valuable. Like people are looking at it, it's helping them make decisions if they want to go to this restaurant or not. But on the other hand, I wasn't getting paid for it. So it was very much like, I'm just doing this for funsies, which is fine. But yeah, would have been nice to get paid. And so what I was able to do, mostly out of sheer luck, but also just out of a little bit of like I wouldn't have been able to accomplish this if I hadn't been posting those photos on Google Maps. I was able to have some conversations with the city and show them the Google Maps results and be like, hey, people are looking at these. Clearly there's value in like high quality photos on this platform. Do you think that we could like map out some different places that need photos like this and then see if that helps them get more business? And so I share all that to say that like, I think for a long time, I felt like in order to get into photography, I needed to like be an apprentice. I needed to find someone who had a niche and was really good at it and just learn from them and do their grunt work for, X number of years until I was comfortable enough and had a big enough portfolio on my own to try to attract my own clients. And I think that with the internet being as powerful and as big as it is right now, I don't think that you have to take that traditional route, and that's really cool and really exciting for some people. So I just wanted to kind of give an example of something that I was able to do that didn't take any like unique access or unique skills to accomplish. Something that could be worth trying out if you're interested in it. Okay. Favorite purchase of 2024. I originally put the DJI Pocket 3, which I'm filming on right now, but I switched it to my MacBook Pro. I got into video. I got into professional video work at the end of 2024, and I was using the Nikon Z6 III, and I was shooting in InRAW, and those files, like I think I did video coverage for a basketball tournament for 2 hours, and I came back with 960 something gigs of footage because I shot in the highest quality in InRAW. So I would not have been able to handle all of that footage with the MacBook, the M1 MacBook Air that I had. I think it was only like 512 gig storage, but also like the footage gets slow a little bit on this computer, so I know it wouldn't have been able to handle it with the M1 MacBook. So yeah, really grateful for this. I also do a lot of my 9 to 5 work on my computer, so it was just like an all-around good investment for me, not just in photography. And then kind of on the flip side, I want to talk about some gear that I bought that I haven't used that much. So I mentioned the video work. I bought a gimbal for it. I use it for the video work. I don't think I would have been happy with the results if I didn't have the gimbal, but I haven't used the gimbal since, and I don't really see myself taking it on like trips. So I'm not really sure when I'll use it, but I think I'll stick with it just in case I do get hired for more video work in the future, or if I ever do want to do like a higher production video, whether that's for YouTube or even just like I guess I could take it for a trip. Maybe just not one that's on a plane. I mean, I could take it on a plane, but I just feel like it's kind of bulky and hard to pack. So yeah. And then the other thing that I bought that I haven't used much in 2024 or really so far this year is I bought a small rig light, just a constant light. And that was so that I could make YouTube videos at night, or if I needed to be in a studio and I didn't want to mess around with the flash or anything like that, I could just have the constant light. So I still think that'll be helpful. There are definitely situations that I find myself in where I wish I had more light. But yeah, I haven't really used it much since I got it. So we'll see if it lasts through 2025. And then the way that I would like to close this video is just talking through kind of my learnings from my print. So I printed 60 photos. I think in Lightroom for 2024, I kept like 3,600 photos or something like that. And so I tried to take 5 from each month and print a total of 60 photos. Ended up not really shaking out that way because there were some months where we traveled to London or Japan where I took a lot more photos that I love versus other months. But I still try to print my 60 favorites, and I think I was able to kind of pull away some different themes that are interesting to me. So hopefully they'll be interesting to you. The first one, 48 out of the 60 photos had blue and or green in them. And I think that's really interesting because I don't really, if you would have asked me, I wouldn't have said that I had like a favorite color to photograph, but clearly I do. I also think that it's kind of interesting that it's blue and or green, but there aren't a ton of like landscape photos. And so I wonder if that's something that I would enjoy doing if I had, more access to like mountains or water. Something to consider for sure. Another learning is that my favorite like focal range, or the most common from the prints, was between 35 and 50 millimeters. And I think also it was like 40 out of 60 or 42 out of 60 photos were taken in that focal range. And to me, that just really, I think, emphasizes that so far I don't have a style, but if I had to put a word to it, it would just be authentic. I think that I don't typically use, funky zooms or funky lenses with like very unique, like focal ranges or anything like that. I don't really feel like I love like super punchy colors or oversaturation or anything like that. And so for me, it's just like, I think I want a photo to look like real life or to feel like real life. And I think maybe that's why I gravitated towards film for a while and kind of found my editing style through film, because it felt the most like real life, or maybe the most authentic, at least to me. And so the focal range kind of being in that normal range definitely makes a lot of sense. The other thing that I thought was pretty interesting is I had 4 black and white photos from 2024 that I ended up printing. I don't know if I've ever had that many black and white photos that I've liked in a year. And so that's definitely something that I tried a lot with this camera specifically, and something that I want to continue to do in 2025. I still don't feel like I've kind of nailed like a black and white edit or recipe that I love, but would love to figure that out. And then I think maybe the last thing that I can think about for learnings from the prints. Oh, I already mentioned this one a little bit, but just to double down, I guess. 32, I think, or 28 or 32 of the 60 photos were either JPEGs or film. And yeah, I want to continue to do more of that. And I think I want to try to shoot more film in 2025. Towards the end of 2024, I was able to fix the light leaks on my Fujica. And so I think I'll be using that a lot more lately. And I'll show this photo right now. This is a portrait of my friend's husband, Tom. And I think that this photo like isn't technically great. Like the leaf or flower or whatever kind of looks like it's growing out of him. But I was really excited about that because it was Phoenix 200. It was manual focus, and I think I maybe even stopped down to like f2 or something like that. So it just felt really rewarding to like get that photo and for it to turn out pretty good using like a kind of experimental film stock with a camera that I just tried to fix the light leaks on. So yeah, I think I'll definitely try to use that camera more in 2025 and continue to learn more about film and hope that it informs more of my editing decisions and Yeah, maybe just to like sum it all up, I don't think that I'm looking for a particular style. There's still lots of photography types that I haven't tried, like astrophotography or wildlife. Like I mentioned, I don't do a ton of landscape, so like I don't really feel like I can have a style until I've tried everything, which I don't, that's not really true, but that's at least how I feel right now. Um, but yeah, I'm excited to continue to learn more about myself through photography and try to just continue to push the hobby in a direction that I'm excited about. So 2024 was pretty good, and I'm hoping that 2025 will be even better for photography. We're hoping to go back to Japan. We are also thinking about maybe some other places that we would like to see. So yeah, hopefully there's lots of opportunities both abroad and local for me to take some good photos and share them here. So yeah. Thanks for sticking around. If you have any questions, let me know. But I think the next video will probably be about the Fujifilm X-F10, and I took it to like the Northeast, so I'll do a little bit of a video on that. So yeah, catch you then.